Good morning, everybody, and thanks for joining us here at Oakridge Student Ministries. I'm Jeff, and I'm the youth minister here at OPC. It's wonderful to have you join us this week because this week we're starting our new series called Who is Jesus? And it's an exciting time around here because we're officially moving into the Easter season. And Easter is wonderful, not just because we get to find candy and chocolate around the house, but because it gives us a chance to think about and to remember everything that Jesus has done for us. It gives us a chance to get to know him in a new way. And that's a really big deal because as we've been talking about all year long, knowing Jesus changes everything. So over the next 5 weeks, we're going to be asking the question, who is Jesus? And if we're honest, I think we'd all say that we've asked this question in some way a few times before. So, if you're here with us in person, I want to take a minute to pause here and ask you this question. What questions do you have about Jesus? Thanks everybody for sharing. I want you to know that it's okay to ask. In fact, Jesus wants you to ask. Because asking these questions is what helps you to get to know him more. And that's a really big deal. That's a really big part of growing in this whole faith thing. Have you ever felt completely alone? The truth is, we all know what it feels like to feel alone. Even if you're in a room full of people, when nobody really knows you, it can feel like a really lonely place. You probably know what I mean. Even if you have a million friends, or a group to hang out with, or a constant conversation with friends on apps, or 20 group texts going at the same time, or a team of people who support you, not only on the court or on the field, but also off, a group of friends to sit with at lunch. Even though you have all of these things, you might still feel lonely. You may even have a little voice in your head that tells you that you don't really fit in, or no one really knows you, or you'll never really feel connected to someone else. The reason I know you might think this, well, besides the fact that I've felt and thought all those things a time or two myself, there's actual research that proves it. There was a study that they did that found that 40% of people felt lonely or disconnected from others most of the time. That's 4 out of 10 people who feel pretty alone or left out on a regular basis. 4 out of 10 of your friends. 4 out of 10 people here at church. 4 out of 10 people in your class. Even when surrounded by others, 40% of us still feel disconnected or alone. In fact, for most of us, it can feel like there's something that keeps us from being with other people. I mean, sure, we can see or hear what's going on over there, but there's something that just keeps us at arm's length, that keeps us from being able to join in. There's something that keeps us from connection. There's something between us and them. And that makes us feel like we're left all alone out here. But what if I told you that you're not alone? For starters, you're definitely not the only one who feels this way. Everyone struggles with this feeling of being disconnected and alone at times. But beyond that, you're not alone because of Jesus. Now listen, I know what you might be thinking. Not alone because of Jesus? What does that even mean? Well, I say it because I think it's true. And maybe you do too. Maybe the idea of Jesus being with you makes things feel better or easier for you. Or maybe the idea of Jesus being with you is just plain confusing. Maybe the idea of Jesus, who is God's Son, sent to earth to save us, doesn't change all that much for you. The idea of a God who seems far away or old or distant is not exactly helpful. It doesn't feel helpful when your friends leave you out, or when you feel like an outsider in your own family, or when you feel just disconnected. In those moments, what does Jesus mean for you, really? If that's how you feel, I get it. But I'm really glad that you're here with us today, because I want you to stick with us, because I think that by asking questions about who Jesus is, we'll discover just how much knowing Jesus does change everything, including when we feel disconnected. Conversations about who Jesus really is come up a lot this time of year. Easter celebrates the moment in history when Jesus died and then came back to life. And while it is this really amazing, incredible thing that happened, it's also something that made people ask a lot of questions along the way. Questions about who Jesus is and what his death on the cross means for us. And since it's okay to ask questions when it comes to our faith, I want to dive into some of that with you today. To kick things off, we're going to jump right to the moment at the end of Jesus' life. But first, let me give you some background. This is going to be a little bit of a history lesson, and if history isn't your thing, please stick with me, because this is kind of important. See, Jesus lived in ancient Israel and grew up in the first century Jewish culture. A huge part of life for people who lived then was the temple. The temple was where people went to worship God. It was also the place where all the important things in town happened. And certain parts of the temple were only for certain people. For example, if you weren't Jewish, you had to stay way out on the outside. Women, even if they were Jewish, could only go one step further. Jewish men could go inside, but only to certain places. Priests could go another step further. You see, the whole thing was built so that people kept their distance from the center of the temple, a place called the Holy of Holies. That's where God was. And because God was so holy, people couldn't get too close. So that part was sectioned off by a curtain. In fact, even the most important priest was only allowed to go beyond that curtain once a year. The point of this little history lesson is, the culture that Jesus lived in had a lot of separation. The people literally couldn't get beyond the curtain. They were disconnected. People were separated from each other. And most importantly, everybody was separated from the place where God was. And without Jesus, everybody would have stayed there. They would have stayed separated from God. Back then, people asked a lot of questions about Jesus. Why did Jesus come to earth? What was he trying to do? Was he really the Son of God? Some people thought he was just a good teacher. Other people thought he was a political leader who would overthrow the Roman rule. Nobody expected that same Roman government would actually arrest Jesus and sentence him to death. But they did. When it was happening, it was awful. Jesus was tortured and beaten and insulted by those who were torturing him. But as this was happening, God was using this moment to do so much more. Check it out. And when Jesus had cried out again in a loud voice, he gave up his spirit. At that moment, the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. Guys, this is a huge deal. Remember that curtain, the one that kept everyone away from God? The one that only one person a year could go into? At that moment when Jesus died, this curtain was ripped apart. The days of separation were over forever. Before, only that once a year could the most important person, the most holy person, the one that did all the 600 rules right, could get close enough to God. But in that one moment when Jesus died, he changed everything. Jesus made it perfectly clear that there would never be separation between God and God's people again. It changed everything for the people back then. And it can change everything for us too. Your friends may feel distant, but God isn't. You may feel like other people don't know you or don't want to be close to you, but God does. You may feel like you have to be good to be around God, but you don't. Nothing you do or don't do can separate you from God who loves you so much. One of Jesus' friends, a guy named John, wrote down everything about his experience with Jesus while he was on earth. John saw it all, including the way Jesus' death and resurrection changed everything. And I think one of the things John tells us that Jesus said can help us understand who Jesus is to us. And that's written in John chapter 15, verse 15. I no longer call you servants, because a servant does not know his master's business. Instead, I have called you friends. For everything I have learned from my Father, I have made known to you. We are friends with Jesus. That's so amazing to me. Jesus is my friend. I love that thought. But as cool as that is, I think that there's more to it than that. It's not just we're friends so we can hang out and go camping and stuff. It's we're friends because I'll turn the world upside down, defeat death, and even tear the curtain in two to prove that we're connected. You and I and all the people on earth are connected. And from now on, you're always going to be connected to God. My death, Jesus said, on the cross, made sure that that was possible no matter what. We can never be separated from God. And you are not alone. In other words, because of Jesus, you can be connected with God. That's what Easter means. That's what Easter means for me, and that's what Easter means for all of us. And this is who Jesus really is. He's the connection point from us to God. So even when you feel disconnected from your friends, or from people at school, or even from people at home, you never have to be disconnected from God. There is no curtain between you. There is no wall that you can't get past. God is close to you, no matter what, right now. Maybe you've never thought about the fact that Jesus is like a close friend. Maybe you've believed the stories of who Jesus is from your grandparents or from somebody at church or the Christian on TikTok. As we begin these stories, I want to challenge you to find out for yourself. I want you to feel like you can ask the question, who is Jesus? Because it's okay to ask. It's actually one of the reasons we have our small groups here. It's so that we can remind each other of what's true about who Jesus really is. That even when we feel far away, there is no separation. Because of Jesus, you can be connected with God. For some of you, this might be the first time you've realized that you can be close to God. And if that's you, a huge step you can take today is to talk to a trusted adult, to a parent, or to your small group leader about that. Talk to them about what it means to connect with God, to follow God, and to grow in your relationship with God. These are people who want to help you understand how knowing Jesus can change everything for you. Then I want you all to try this. The next time you find yourself feeling lonely or disconnected or separated, go to God. Tell God how you feel. Spend time with God. Reach out to a friend who you know will encourage you to remember what's true about God. Listen to worship music or pray or write down your thoughts in a journal to God. Whatever it looks like to you, take a step to connect with God when you feel disconnected. Because no matter what, you can remember that because of Jesus, you can be connected with God. I want you to think about this. What if you're not as alone or disconnected as you think you are? What if nobody is? What if that little thing inside of you that says, I feel alone and disconnected, shouldn't be this way, is actually a reminder that God didn't create you to be disconnected. God made a way to be close to you. Because of Jesus, you can be connected with God. And that means you never have to be alone. So, now, as we wrap up today, I want you to think about this question. What's one way you can connect with God?